Welcome to lesson number 7 of What Does It Mean to Be Jewish Today. Hi, Gilad.
Hi, Chaim.
How are you doing?
Good. Hello, everyone, all of our viewers.
Hello to you as well, of course. And
before we start, we'll just remind you that, as usual, we'll be here on the chat, and you can ask any questions you'd like related to the lesson, and we'll be happy to answer them.
And speaking of questions, we ended the last session that we had with a bit of homework. Actually, it was, I think, in the middle of our lesson, and we talked about unity and how to implement it. And we suggested that you try it out. We gave a few rules. We called it a workshop, and we said, you want to get together. It's the holidays, right? Everybody's together, families, whatnot. Sometimes it's actually it's a very festive atmosphere, but it could also be a little pressing, a little tense. So we suggested a few rules to the discussion, right? No negation of what the other person says. You only add. You use an attention object. Everybody's equal. Everybody's opinion matters just the same. You only add to it. You don't put down someone else's words. You only speak one at a time. That's why you have the attention object, etc.
We also said that those rules are actually what create what science has found today to be collective intelligence, that it creates this social sensitivity between the participants and people that usually burst into the conversation, like I just did to you now. No, but we have an understanding. So if you create that in a circle or with people, and you create this, you go according to these rules, then you develop this social sensitivity. You're forced, according to these rules, to listen to a person and not just butt in and force your opinion onto it. And that creates this something new that people don't usually experience.
Exactly, that's the idea, to create something new. Not my opinion, not Gilad's opinion, but something that we've created between us. And that something belongs to both of us equally. And that something will always be something that's common between us. Without either one of us, the whole thing will not exist. That's the beauty of it. So, one of you guys sent us a very nice email describing an experience that he had. I'm going to read it to you. I had lunch yesterday with a friend and his wife. I hadn't seen him for 18 years, and have had no communication. Back then, I was participating in the Big Brother program with him. I applied this communication trick, that's what he calls it, and we had a very lively discussion about where his career is going. I remembered him as not being too communicative. To my delight, he has become a very intelligent young man who had a lot to say. By using this building technique, we developed a lot of ideas about his career, and I also had good discussions with his wife. This is a great application of bestowal. So, thank you for sending it. And please, if you've had similar experiences, or maybe even negative ones, and we want to hear about it, maybe we can improve on it. Please share it with us. Use the chat and tell us your stories. We're going to read them here. If not, just send it by email afterwards. You get the follow-up emails. In the reply, please send your stories, your impressions. They're very important for us. They teach us a lot. So please do share.
Mm-hmm. If you want to expand more about the workshop and maybe talk about some experiences, and maybe we can further on in today's lesson, or maybe in further lessons.
In further lessons, yeah. I was thinking about doing a lot of that in lessons 9 and 10. By the way, because we're pretty advanced in our lessons already, I'm telling you up front, I want to dedicate, we were talking about having a Q&A lesson, right? Mm-hmm. So, since 9 and 10 will be more about the applications, we had in mind to use lesson number 8 to really go through the material using your questions. Okay, so lesson number 8 will be a Q&A lesson, also because chapter number 8 really is about it's all about unity. Quotes about unity, and we've gone through a lot of it. We're going to go through some more of it today, but you already probably know the principle that through unity you attain everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you can see, we're adapting the course. We're going obviously according to the syllabus,
Right.
but we're adapting it according to what the viewers are asking for and sending questions about and sending emails about throughout the week, and we're adapting it. We're adding to the course according to that.
Exactly. So we want to dedicate a whole lesson. We think it merits it. So next lesson will be all about Q&A. So get ready and send us your questions. We are going to answer some questions now, but we have a lot of material to cover. I'm not sure we're going to have time to go through all of it, but we are going to answer some questions from the previous lesson right now. Okay, so let's get right to it. Why have we lost our unity? Well, assuming this question refers to the Jewish people and the unity that they had, through which they attained this quality of bestowal, attained what we call the Creator. And why have we lost it? Okay, there are two reasons. One of them we're going to talk about today, but the other one that I want to focus on right now is just the fact that the ego is growing all the time. Humans are different in the sense that we are developing constantly, not just quantitatively, meaning that we want more, but we also want it in a different way. There's a very famous maxim that says, he who has 100 wants 200. He who has 200 wants 400. In other words, the minute we have what we've been looking for, we want twice as much. So that's on the quantitative level, but on the qualitative level, we also want it in a different way. We want, say, I don't know, if you were, if you loved, for example, people who aspire for money, for example. Once they have a lot of it, they usually move on to aspiring for power. It's a qualitative change, not just they don't just want more money. They usually want to use that money now in order to gain power. Not just to use the power in order to gain more money. That's also true. And they don't lose their desire for money, of course. But another desire is added, and then they find themselves in a different in different activities that involve getting power, getting into power positions. So with humans, what happens is that the more our egos grow, the harder for us it becomes to stay united. At some point, the people of Israel couldn't maintain their unity because the ego grew to a point where they could not maintain it anymore. And there's a profound reason here. Attaining the Creator, attaining the quality of unity and through it the revelation of the Creator isn't intended for the Jewish people. It is intended for humanity. The whole of humanity, and science supports it now in so many ways that it's like stating the obvious now. Humanity is one entity. The fact that we don't feel it is because we are so self-centered. But underneath everything, humanity functions like a single organism. And what one person does affects the whole organism. But we are not aware of it. Animals and plants and even minerals all function instinctively as parts of a greater organism, and therefore the balance is maintained. That's why we call it ecosystem. And nature naturally controls the populations, the balance, the climate, everything, and keeps it in balance. With humans, because we are intended to attain it consciously, before we attain it consciously, we are unconscious of it. And as a result, we don't function as a single entity. Now you might say, okay, so if we function as a single entity and get this awareness, at the end of the process we'll be like animals. So what's the point of being human in the first place, if we are going to function like animals do in the first place? That's not the idea. The idea is that by gaining this awareness, you become like the Creator. You become creators. You meaning everyone, the whole of humanity. We talked about the cells, how their collective awareness makes them an organism. And we talked about how this is how evolution developed. From unicellular creatures into cell colonies, into multicellular organisms, where the cells need to get sustenance for their existence, but they're constantly aware of the organism. Their own lives don't matter anymore because they are aware of the organism of which they are part. And that's what we're going to gain. And by gaining that, we transcend life and death. Just like cells don't exist as separate entities, but continue to exist as an organism, even if a single cell doesn't exist anymore. The organism exists, and the cell is aware of it. It's part of it all the time. When we attain that awareness, we will become immortal in the sense that our bodies will not be the only thing that we're aware of. Rabash, Dr. Lightman's teacher, told him that it's like getting to a point where if your body is about to die, for you, it's like taking off a dirty shirt at the end of the day and putting on a new clean one the next day. So the idea is to not only become like the Creator, but in every sense of the word to do so. So you attain eternity and the perfection of the Creator, the perfection of nature, and the omniscience of nature, everything. You become like the Creator, and that's the purpose of the existence of humanity. And as perfect as we are going to be at the end of the process, we are imperfect. Right now, Bala Sulam, Rav Yehuda Ashlag, Rabash's father and author of the Sulam commentary on the Zohar, compared it to an apple. When it's ripe, it's sweet and beautiful, but as it grows, it's sour, it's unhealthy, and it's there's no beauty to it. So that's where we are now. But we can either grow and get to that ripeness in an adventurous, fascinating, good way, and quick. Or we can get there through wars, through suffering, through a lot of pain. Just like, if you have to go through school, you can either get through it willingly or unwillingly, while enjoying what it has to offer or not. choice is ours. So we've lost our unity because our egos have to grow in order for us to finally attain the Creator, but do it consciously. So now it's the stage where we have to do it consciously. But because we have to do it consciously, it cannot be done by just 1, 2, 3, 3,000, 3 million people. It needs to be done by all 7 billion of us, or however many people there are in humanity. And therefore, the Hebrews, the Jews, whatever you want to call them, lost their unity and dispersed. What's the idea? The idea is to disperse two main ideas, and we talked about it last week. Two main ideas. One, there's only one force. We call it monotheism today. There's only one force, one creator. That's the force that exists. That's the force that manages things. And that's what you want to look up to. What we lost is the goal, to be like it. Okay, that's what we're coming back to. But we are focusing on that one force. Number 2, love your neighbor as yourself. That's the means to get there. So those two fundamental concepts have, since the dispersion of the Jewish people some 2,000 years ago, have spread throughout the world. That was the idea. Now is the time of the ingathering of the nations, when people are becoming aware that the self-centered trend we've been marching on for so many years has exhausted itself, and we have to start looking for a new paradigm. Again, I'm sure Gilad will give me like 200 references to that in like 2 minutes. We need a new paradigm now, because we cannot be selfish and still sustain ourselves and this planet for much longer. And everybody's aware of it.
It's actually similar to the research we spoke about, I think, a couple of weeks ago. We just remind that we spoke about the evolutionary biologist thesis on the development of evolution. Remember when we were saying that every state of unity has this first this state of separation, then conflict, and then only after there's conflict there can be this negotiation to create a higher level of unity again. So I think that's exactly where humanity is standing at right now.
Exactly. And everybody understands it. Look, you have an intergovernmental panel for climate change. A huge body organized and managed by the UN. So it doesn't get more formal than that. We're in trouble. And the idea is to invoke this new paradigm that we are one, that there is mutual responsibility between us, whether we like it or not, but we need to implement it positively. So, but we don't know how. And that's when the Jews step into the picture. They need to rekindle themselves and in themselves this unity, this method for attaining unity, and to spread it out to everyone. We ourselves have been working, Dr. Lightman and his team has been working with the UN, with UNESCO, as well as with the General Assembly. He met with Dr. Asha Rose Mirago. She's the Deputy Director of Director General. I don't know what it's called. Of the UN General Assembly, and we were made an official what they call it, consulting agency, whatever, to the UN in 2012, when the focus of the year was about education. So we're working toward that, but again, it's got to be something that each one of us does. So it cannot stay on the top level only. It's got to trickle down to everywhere, to the whole of humanity, and that's why we're doing this course.
By the way,
I'd like at this point to go over into the lesson and talk about something very important. I'm not sure how much we're going to do today, but I'd like to really focus on one thing, on the dispersion of the Jews throughout the world, because you can see a very typical, very characteristic way in which they disperse. Because what happens is that Jews lose their unity, so they constantly tend to disperse in their host nations. However, their role is to disperse unity. But because they are now broken, meaning self-centered, what they are not only dispersing, but what they're aspiring for is to disperse, to mingle, to assimilate, just like they did in the first temple. But now they can't. Now they have to eventually become a role model. So you got to have a Jewish people. The 10 tribes that assimilated after the ruin of the first temple don't exist anymore as Jews. They are part of the nations now. But you got to have a Jewish people that will eventually rekindle unity and offer it to the world. So what happens is, you can see a wave that whenever Jews get to a certain place, they try to mingle. They're welcome there. They try to mingle. They mingle to an extent, and then they are persecuted. Why are they persecuted? Because when they are persecuted, they are forced to reunite. That's why we say that Jews are united only when they're persecuted, and it's true. When you are broken, that's exactly what it is. Before the ruin of the temple, Jews were working on it all the time. Regardless of persecutions, they had quarrels all the time, but those quarrels were only revelations of disunity that were used to enhance unity. Now they don't have that. They don't aspire for unity in the first place, so they need an outside force. But it's very interesting to see what's happening here, because every time they are persecuted, two things happen. A, they reunite, and B, they are chased to other countries. As a result, their expansion increases. I'm just going to jump into the PowerPoint presentation here.
Just a second before you do, I'll just add one thing.
Yeah.
We were talking about the interconnected world, and we were saying that we have to kind of reveal this connection between us. So it's actually, the connection is there regardless of if we turn it into something positive or not. But right now it's here as something negative. And if we can have a look at the computer screen for a second. So I'll give Havel a second. Anyway, the World Economic Forum has a yearly report of global risks. And they basically map the highest risk factors for every year.
Yeah. Havel, can you show the computer screen, please?
My one? Oh, he has a technical thing that he can't show it right now. Okay. Basically, what I'm looking at a map of risks, of global risks. Now, the interesting thing about this map is that these risks, climate change, data fraud, corruption, terrorist attacks, cyber attacks, income disparity, food crisis, liquidity crisis, and so on. There's a bunch of a list of 50 crises here. Now, the interesting thing is that these crises are completely interconnected, meaning there are 529 connections tying these crises together. So one crisis automatically affects the other one, which automatically affects the other one. So you can't isolate one thing, and we can see that it's not
these are only the connections they found.
These are just the connections they found.
There are probably
exactly.
a lot more.
Exactly, and they're probably, intertwined with other things as well. As we said,
There's no
with
end to
everything,
it.
There's no end to it. So the fact that everything is intertwined, and the fact that everything today has already been found to be hyperconnected, that's already a fact. Now the question is, what do we do with this hyperconnectivity that we're discovering today? Do we turn it into this form of positive connections, or are we keeping it as it is right now, which is mainly an interconnection of global crises which are following one after another, and we can see it. We have crisis after crisis after crisis. Maybe some are more severe, some are a little less, but they're happening constantly, and they're just, affecting one another.
So it only stands to reason that if I act negatively toward another person or another, toward anything, really, then I'm immediately negatively influencing the entire system.
Exactly, because you're in the system, and that's a fact. And
you can't get out of it.
Every single person is tied by 1,000 connections. There's that research of 6 degrees of freedom.
Right.
That every person is connected to every other person in the world through 6 people.
Right.
It's been found to be less than that due to Facebook, so now it's already 4.74. So basically that means that you at home...
And counting down.
And counting down. And actually I read research that among the Jewish people it's even less.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But that basically means that every one of you viewers at home are connected to Chaim or to myself through less than 5 people, meaning there's a link of 5 people that we can link to each other, so someone that knows someone that knows someone that knows someone that knows Chaim. And that's a fact, meaning everything we do creates these ripples. And as Chaim just said, if we create these negative ripples, then that ripples out. And can we elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
It's actually...
I'm enjoying this.
That's the topic of my thesis that I'm doing. I'm doing a thesis on distribution of positivity in a network.
You're not going to do a whole dissertation right now, right?
No. I'll just give the abstract.
Okay.
So basically, in that thesis, I'm examining... first of all, it's based on a research called a tipping point, which is a very, very interesting research that shows that you need only 10% of the population. Now this is interesting. 10% of the population
to change public opinion,
to be dedicated to an opinion, but they have to be dedicated to it. They can't be just going back and forth. You need 10% to be dedicated to an opinion, for the opinion to spread very, very quickly to the entire population.
Yeah, it's a research by some American college.
It's a research. It was published, I think, in the Scientific American.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so now the question is, right now it seems that our viewers and the people that understand the need for a paradigm shift are less than 10%. So what do?
So we only have to convince 700 million people,
that's
totally convinced, that this is the way, unity is the way, and that's it. We're good to go.
Actually, you can look at it like a ripple effect as well, because you can only have to convince 10% of people in different hubs. And then from those hubs, it'll start spreading to the rest of humanity. But the question is, what happens if you have less than 10%? Then it takes infinite time to spread. So here we have 2 options. Either people go through enough suffering, and then they begin to understand that they have to change their way of thinking, adapt to this new paradigm shift. Or the other option, and that's exactly the topic I'm doing in my thesis, is you have to create an environment that supports these positive relations that we've been talking about throughout the course. And if you're able to create such an environment, then perhaps you need even less than 10%. I'll tell you the answer when I find it, of what percentage that is exactly.
Enticing.
But that's basically what we're talking about here, because if we begin to create this kind of environment, if we're talking about, why we're doing this online course as well, and we're inviting everyone, we're doing it for free, because we have no interest
for exactly that reason.
Exactly. So we're actually just trying to create these environments everywhere we can, distribute these materials as broadly as possible, and even that workshop method that you were talking about, that you presented last week, it's a method that we're developing, and we're trying to, get into educational systems, successfully actually getting to educational systems with it, getting into different organizations, to start creating these positive ripples in humanity.
All right. I want to read you something. Let me just see if we're through with technical problems. let's try this. Can you show that thing you were showing on the screen before, the interconnected map?
Oh, okay. Now it should work. I had to press this.
Oh, all right.
This link. Yes.
Okay, Pavel, can you show the map now? Can you show Gilad's screen?
See if he's got it.
Can you show Gilad's screen?
Let's see. No.
No. Okay.
There's some technical issue. Usually it works.
All right.
This time it's not working.
Well, you explained it beautifully anyway, so we're good.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's look at slide number. All right. Let's look at slide number 3. See what it says here about the spreading of the Jews. Professor Emeritus of Judaism at the University of Wales, Dan Cohen-Sherbock, wrote, "The paradox of Jewish life is that hatred and Jewish survival have been interrelated for thousands of years, and that without anti-Semitism, we may be doomed to extinction." In other words, that's an exaggeration, but the idea is that, well, I'm just going to read the rest. Today, many Jews are still trying to assimilate into their host cultures. But for all the apparent success in some countries, history shows that it has never succeeded, and the Jewish task mandates that it never will. Precisely, that's because... What?
It's working now.
It's working now. Good. That's because the idea is that the Jews will end up being a role model of unity. So there has to be a distinct group to which the world looks for answers. And they have to provide those answers. And therefore the Jews cannot disappear now. But if they don't do what they have to, if they don't provide the answers, then they suffer. Then they are afflicted and persecuted and whatnot. Look at slide number 4. We talked about what happens when the Jews try to assimilate too much. Try to disappear. Jane S. Gerber, an expert on Sephardic history at the City University of New York, eloquently details the extent to which Spain's Jews and conversos are Jews who converted into Christianity, immersed themselves in Spain's secular and cultural life. The emphasis are the editors. That's me. Deeply rooted in the Iberian Peninsula since the dawn of their dispersion, writes Gerber, these Jews had fervently nurtured a love for Spain and felt a deep loyalty to her language, regions, and traditions. In fact, Spain had been considered a second Jerusalem. What's wrong with being loyal to the country you live in? Nothing, of course. But you cannot be disloyal to your task, because your task is what you will eventually have to fulfill. This is what you owe the world as a Jew. And unless you do it, you cannot be. This is what Churchill said. We read it, I think, a couple of weeks ago. He said, "I believe a Jew cannot be a good Englishman unless he's a good Jew." Meaning what? If we provide unity to the world, solidarity, mutual responsibility, which the world so badly needs today, we're welcome everywhere. If we don't, we are rejected everywhere. So there's this, I'd say, universal quality to what the Jews have to provide. And a lot of people talk about the universal nature of Judaism. Let's continue with Professor Gerber's quotes. Look at slide number 5. When King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella's decree of expulsion was promulgated on March 31, 1492, ordering the 300,000 Jews of Spain to leave within 4 months. The Sephardim reacted with shock and disbelief. Surely, they felt, the prominence of their people in all walks of life, the sheer longevity of their communities, and the presence of so many Jews and Christians of Jewish ancestry, conversos, yes, in the inner circles of the court, municipalities, and even the Catholic Church, could provide protection and divert the decree. Slide number 6, please. Spanish Jews were especially proud of their long line of poets whose songs continued to be recited. Their philosophers had been influential even among the scholars of the West. Their innovative grammarians had earned a lasting place as pioneers of the Hebrew language, and their mathematicians, scientists, and innumerable physicians had won acclaim. Notice how similar this is to what is happening today. How many Jewish Nobel Prize winners we have. Their resourcefulness and public service of Sephardic diplomats also fill the annals of many Muslim kingdoms. In fact, they had not just resided in Spain. They had coexisted side by side with Muslims and Christians, taking the notion of living together, la convivencia, that's what they called it, with utmost seriousness. Notice how similar it is to what is happening today in the global Jewish community, and notably in the American Jewish community, in the U.S. especially. Look at slide number 7, please. The experience of Sephardim raises the issue of acculturation and assimilation as no other Jewish community has. For many centuries, Jewish civilization borrowed freely from the surrounding Muslim culture. When persecutions overwhelmed the Sephardim in 1391 and they were offered the choice of conversion or death, the numbers of converts outnumbered the considerable number of martyrs. The very novelty of this mass conversion, unique to Jewish experience, has induced scholars to seek causality in the high degree of acculturation, meaning assimilation, attained by the Sephardim. In other words, basically what she's pointing at is that there's only so much you can assimilate. But in Spain, in Spain, it was still a matter of the continuation of the dispersion. Many Jews were killed, but they weren't destroyed as a people. Instead, they were expelled. They were chased to other countries in Europe, and they were chased to the Ottoman Empire, where the Emperor Bayezid II was delighted to receive them. He welcomed them. He even laughed at King Ferdinand, saying, how can you call him a wise king if he sent away his best citizens? So he welcomed them into Turkey. And that was a continuation of the dispersion. We could see very similar forebears, harbingers of what happened in Spain in 20th century Germany. What's the difference? The difference is that Nazi Germany tried to destroy the Jewish people instead of trying to disperse them. Why? Because since the beginning of the 20th century, we've come to a point, and Balasalam wrote about it in the 1930s already, that we were so interconnected that now we were functioning as a single unit, humanity, and therefore the final correction of uniting humanity had to already start being implemented. That's how late we are, by about 90 years. Maybe even more. So now, the Germans were not trying to disperse the Jews, to send them away, but simply to destroy them. Of course, they failed. They succeeded to a great extent. But they did not destroy the Jewish people. But notice that today's anti-Semites also say, we're going to finish what the Nazis didn't. So again, now the Jews are not being told, you are not wanted here. Now they're being told, you're not wanted anywhere. You're not wanted on this planet. You're not wanted in existence, in the universe, anywhere. So we need to realize there is no escape. We have to do what we have to do, and just go ahead and do it. Let's look at slide number 8 and talk about it. Other questions, by the way?
Yes.
So I'm just going to read. Okay, never mind. Go ahead, ask.
Okay, so before a question, a quick comment. Brenda from Blissfield says, good evening, friends. These lessons are the highlight of my week. Thank you so much.
That's nice.
Yes. That's
Please,
very nice,
if you
Brenda.
have stories, like we said in the beginning of the lesson, things, encounters you had where you tried the workshop method, and we are encouraging you to try it this week as well, please share.
And we have one.
Oh, good.
So Eve from Pennsylvania, she says the following. She says, I was having a holiday lunch with my husband, with my husband's family, using the rules. Everything was going wonderfully, and everyone was happy. Until my father-in-law started talking about the problems with the police and protesters here in the U.S. And he had a view totally opposite to my own. And I exploded. It was
There's the ego for you.
It was like I was watching myself speak. The rules went out of the window and left me feeling very upset and angry.
That's a great discernment. That's a great discernment. But Eve, the reason why you were able to watch yourself, what did she write there?
It says, it was like I was watching myself speak.
That's because of the rules of the workshop. The minute you put them into effect, you are basically forced, even without trying, but this is what happens. You come out of yourself, and you begin to watch the system, and you begin to observe yourself as part of a system. So you watch yourself explode. So that's a beautiful discernment. I guarantee you, next time you try, it won't happen. There will be other problems, but they teach you. The minute you come out of yourself through these very few and simple rules, you become like a student of life. You watch it from above, and it unfolds underneath you. You gain this bird's view eye of yourself, of your surroundings, but you're not detached emotionally. You exist on both levels, and you learn as you go. You learn from your mistakes, but you become more experienced, and you learn to avoid mistakes. You see them happening. You see them coming. That's beautiful. I have no doubt this was a great disillusionment, probably with yourself more than with anyone else. But this is a great learning experience.
It's good also because sometimes people say, "Yeah, I don't need these rules. I'm always like that," but it's not the case, because we know from conversations
None of
with
us
people,
is like that.
we know from discussions that we see on television and from personal experiences that that's not the case. And it's good, Eve, that you saw that very quickly. Sorry, that wasn't Eve, Sylvia.
Oh, Sylvia.
Oh, no. Sorry, Eve.
Yes.
So, Eve, you experienced that very quickly, that These rules are completely change the dialogue, and when you throw them out the window, then things explode.
Right.
And B, that it's not that easy to stick to them. That's also another important thing.
Right.
Like creating this.
Because the ego keeps stepping in.
Exactly. It's like a muscle. You have to work on it. You have to develop it. You have to invest in that thing. So, very nice.
All right.
Okay. More questions regarding what you were talking about now. So Sylvia from Guatemala, she says, how would you explain what's happening with the Jews in the USA? Are they acting like the Sephardic Jews in Spain?
I'm hesitant to say it because they will disagree, the majority of them. So let's put it this way. Instead of me saying it, I'm just going to refer to something that's been on the news for about a week now. You probably remember that Sony's computers were hacked into, and a lot of things leaked. One of the things that leaked was a correspondence between a producer, I'm not going to use names now, between a producer and several actors. Some of them are Jews. And that producer, and there was a conversation in that correspondence about the anti-Semitism and the conflict in Gaza. And the producer wanted the actors' support. He was saying the world is anti-Semitic and whatnot. And one of them said, one of the actors said, "Why are you dragging me into this debate? I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to take sides. I don't want to be part of it. I didn't ask to be on this email list. None of that." So the producer wrote in reply, if you look at what's happening today, if you look at what's happening in the U.S. today, you can see that many of the conditions of the Jews that exist now in the U.S. also existed in Nazi Germany, prior to the rise of the Nazi regime, and even after the Nazi regime arose to power. So that producer is afraid of the situation, and he adds very, very bluntly that he says, if you don't think this can happen again, I think you're wrong. So there are people who find a lot of similarities. Dr. Lightman himself talks about it quite often. If you watch his shows, like A Bundle of Reeds, he speaks about it very openly. I know that many Jews don't see it this way, but if you talk about the acculturation of Jews, you find a lot of similarities to what happened in Spain and what happened later in Germany and what is happening now in the U.S. And Dr. Lightman speaks very openly about a possible return of the Holocaust. Bala Sulam speaks very openly about a possible reoccurrence of a world war. He says third and fourth. He even mentions a fourth world war. And he says that the relics will still have to implement the method and unite and discover the Creator. But the question is, do we want to go through 2 world wars? And he also says there'll be nuclear wars. So yeah, there are similarities, but today we are a lot more aware. The method for uniting is out in the open. Anyone can tap into it and implement it. So it's not like we don't have an antidote. We do. But we do have to use it. You know, you got to take your pills. Otherwise you won't be healthy. So acculturation is one thing. I'm not sure it's negative, personally, but it cannot come at the expense of offering unity to the world. Because personally, I don't see anything wrong with freedom of speech and all those good things that the American Constitution has. Actually, the workshop rules are about freedom of speech. But they are used in order to enhance unity. So that's the key point. We don't need to change anything in our lives. We just need to add unity to what we do and spread it out. That's it. Whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew, spreading unity always does good to anyone around you. So that's very important. More questions?
Mm-hmm. What was the next one? Why do you tell people with points in the hearts they don't have to leave their churches? Isn't that assimilation? It's a question from Ruth.
Ruth, okay. Well, we weren't quite in that point in the lesson, but I'll answer it. Read it again.
Why do you tell people with points in the hearts
Mm-hmm.
that they don't have to leave their churches? Isn't that assimilation?
Isn't that assimilation? How is that assimilation? I'm not sure.
I think what she means is because we were saying that a person with that desire is
Right.
considered Israel. Because
Right.
his desire is straight to the Creator.
Yeah, but
And
he
then
was born.
and
He
then
was born a Christian.
Yeah, but then if that person has a desire for the Creator and he's considered Israel, then going to a church would kind of be considered maybe similar. I think that's what she means.
Okay, we are at the final stages of working on Bala Salam's writings of the last generation. It's going to be available online pretty soon, and there he talks about what happens today. Today we are. That's why I talked about the ingathering of the nations. We're in a stage in our development where people's points in their hearts are awakening, meaning their desire to discover the Creator is awakening. And it's not just happening in Jews, it's happening everywhere. Actually, I think it's happening more in non-Jews than in Jews. And Bala Salam says very clearly, people will not have to change anything about their religions. They will kind of develop a meta religion. Or a principle that overlaps everything else, circles everything else. And that principle is one very simple thing. Love your neighbor as yourself. Period. Look, when you love someone else, you don't care if it's Christian, or a Muslim, or a Jew, or whatever. You don't care about his skin color, you don't care about anything. That's why it says love covers all transgressions. Look at a mother's love for her child. Whatever he does, he's always perfect and righteous in her eyes. It's natural. But we don't have that natural love for each other. When we develop it, we attain the purpose for which we were created. That's why we need to do it consciously. So that's why we need to develop it. But this goes way beyond any religion. Going to church is fine, going to shul is fine, going to a mosque is fine, practicing whatever you want. But just remember that unity, love of others, is what gets you to the purpose of life, of existence. Everything else is fine, but if you add to it that spice, then you will be going in the right direction. And that's why today people's points in their hearts are awakening. They're searching for that spice, for that addition that will give life meaning. going back to how the nations have no choice but to afflict the Jews whenever they don't do what they have to. Look at this interesting quote. Look at slide number 8, please. Because the spiritual role of the Jews is to spread that unity and resulting connection to the rest of the nations reject the Jews' attempts to become like them. It is not a conscious act of choice, but a compulsive drive that comes upon them from the very thought of creation. This only rarely surfaces to the awareness of the perpetrators of affliction, but they unfailingly execute it. Slide number 9, please. In The Jew in the Medieval World, a source book, scholar of Jewish history, Rabbi Jacob Marcus, details the events he discovered had taken place. Now the quote. The agreement permitting Jews to remain in Spain on the payment of a large sum of money was almost completed. In other words, the expulsion was almost revoked when it was frustrated by the interference of a prior who was called the Prior of Santa Cruz. Legend relates that Torquemada, the head of the Spanish Inquisition, prior of the convent of Santa Cruz, thundered with crucifix aloft to the king and queen and said, Judas Iscariot sold his master for 30 pieces of silver. Your Highness would sell him anew for 30,000. Here he is. Take him and powder him away. Slide number 10, please. What happened next illustrates that whatever happens, the Jews are obliged to be what they are and do what they must. Now he continues with the quote. Then the queen gave an answer. Of course, the expulsion was still valid, but the queen gave an answer to why it was still valid. Then the queen gave an answer to the representatives of the Jews, similar to the saying of King Solomon. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turns it wherever he will. She said furthermore, do you believe that this comes upon you from us? The Lord has put this thing into the heart of the king. King Ferdinand in this case. So it was not the king's choice, but it's the Creator's work. In other words, it is embedded within nature. The Jews will do what they have to do. And if they don't, then they are forced into it. Let's jump to slide number, let me see that. One sec. Just go to slide number 15. The last one. I want to read it to you because it's very similar to what we just read. As it turns out, Hitler too thought that the Creator was using the Nazis to do his work. In Mein Kampf, he wrote similar words to the above-mentioned statement of Isabella, Queen of Spain, about the Lord punishing the Jews through the king. This is what he wrote. Eternal nature inexorably avenges the infringement of her commands. Hence, today I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord. In other words, he believed that he was doing what the Creator wants him to do. That's exactly the point. That's why oftentimes Dr. Lightman says the Jews don't have a problem with anti-Semites. They have a problem with themselves. They have to do what they have to do, or nature itself will force it upon them. Through anti-Semites. It always happens through anti-Semites. Nature creates them. The system itself of reality has to force correct the Jews, unless they do it willingly. I'm sure this will invoke many questions.
Mm-hmm. So the next question, we have a question from Lawrence from New York. Lawrence asks, what's the difference between the workshop rules and the U.S. Constitution? In other words, what's the difference between the intention to encourage freedom and the intention to encourage unity?
That's an interesting question. There's nothing wrong with freedom. Unity doesn't mean lack of it. On the contrary, the unity we're talking about here embraces, encourages every person's uniqueness to be used to the utmost. Imagine the kind of closeness that Eve could feel, not just Eve, but all the participants could feel if they overcame that conflict that emerged in that dinner that they had. The more different we are, yet overcome it, not by suppressing our differences, but by creating something in common that's common to all of us, that's made of the differences between us, that we all put into this, just imagine you have this big ball in the middle of a circle, and you're all around the circle, and you're all contributing yourselves into the circle, into the ball. You create this new entity that's made of all these differences. It's so versatile, it's so colorful, it's so different from anything else, it's so complete. Because each of us is different. But that new thing in the middle is complete, because it's made of all the differences, and all those differences, we all contributed our own different angles, and made it a lot more complete than we are alone. So imagine that all 7 billion of us contribute our differences to the center of the circle. That will be the perfect entity. So really there's freedom of self-fulfillment only when there's unity. That's when it is truly realized. The freedom in the U.S. Constitution allows for every person to become yourself, to be who you are. But because we are so selfish today, that freedom to be who you are happens at the expense, and we can see it in life. That's reality. It happens at the expense of the others, who also want to be free and deserve to be free. And none of us, including those who are winning the war, who think they are winning the war, none of us will be happy unless everybody is free and everybody fulfills who they are. So the only way to fulfill who we are is by being united, and by just sticking to freedom according to the Constitution. We end up with ruthless competition that destroys everyone, eventually even the winners. More?
Maybe we'll continue another quote and then we'll go back to another question.
Okay. Let me see if I still want to cover some more aspects of today's lesson. Yes. Okay, let's read slide number 11 and see if we can elaborate on that. Slide number 11, please. Rabbi Hillel Zeitlin wrote this. If Israel is the one true redeemer of the entire world, of course through personal example, so we have to unite first and all that, it must be fit for that redemption. Israel must first redeem its own soul. But how will it redeem its soul? Will the nation, which is in ruins, both in matter and in spirit, no unity, become a nation made entirely of redeemers who are spreading unity? For that purpose, writes Zeitlin, I wish to establish with this book the unity of Israel. If founded, he writes, the unification of individuals will be for the purpose of internal, meaning spiritual, ascension, and an invocation for corrections for all the ills of the nation and the world. So that's really the point. The Jews, as you can see, will never be treated or viewed as equal in the sense that they will always be at the center of attention. They'll always be judged, simply put. We're talking about, allowing everyone freedom and all that. The Jews don't have freedom. They're judged constantly. And in that sense, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or you're an Israeli, because a lot of people make a distinction between anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. At the end of the day, there has been claims against Jews for I don't know how many reasons that Jews are not hated for just because they're Jews, but because they are because of their money, and then because of their different race, and because there were blood libels. There are all kinds of reasons to hate Jews. Now it's because of occupation or political reasons or whatnot. And by the way, never mind. We're not going to get into politics right now. The point is that, and really, there is, Baruch Salam writes it, there is no justification for the existence of the State of Israel unless we implement what we have to implement here. The unity which we spread out to the world. And the same goes for world Jewry. So as Zeitlin writes here, what we need to establish is unity for the purpose of internal ascension and an invocation of corrections. In other words, spreading out this unity, the correction of unity, and through it, the revelation of the Creator throughout all of humanity. That's the purpose of the whole process of our evolution as humanity. When we do that, we will achieve happiness. Until we do that, we will go from bad to worse. And the Jews have to start. Of course, non-Jews are welcome to join. Everybody's welcome. Everybody has to be there. But everybody's looking at the Jews. Anyway, well, we've been through that. So you know the story. That's it for today. That was today's lesson. For next week, please send us questions. As many as possible, as provocative and angry as possible, whatever. Just don't hold back. Just throw everything you want on print, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. So that's your homework. And also, try to do the workshop. Try to stick to the workshop rules, even when it's hard. And see what you learn about yourself and about others in the process. It's going to be fascinating.
We actually sent you the rules in an email, so we'll resend it again so you have the rules and you can try it out. It guarantees you have a great experience. So announcements? Okay, so
Yes.
the next lesson, lesson number 8, its topic is relevant, or are we going to do a just Q&A?
We're going to do a Q&A, you're right.
Okay, so for next lesson, it's going to be a Q&A session. So like Chaim said, please send in your questions. Now, the way to send in a question is when you get an email following this lesson with a link, you can simply reply to it with your question. So we'd be happy to get any questions about anything related to this topic, of course, and we'll be happy to answer them in the next lesson. Facebook, we have a Facebook page. If you don't know yet, then you can go in and you can get the links of the lesson there and other interesting updates and articles. While you're there, press the like button, please. And that's it for today.
Okay, so we hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed it.
One last thing, if
Yes?
we're going to have, sorry, I missed this one out. If we're going to have a Q&A session tomorrow, next week, then we
Oh,
can also
that's
have,
good.
we also have an option for video questions. In other words, if you want to send in your video question, what you can do is you can record yourself just on a simple webcam. It doesn't have to be a complicated production. Upload that video to YouTube and just send us a link as a reply to the email about to the email you'll get with the link to the lesson. So you just record yourself, put it on YouTube, and send us the link. How to send it? Just reply to one of the emails you got from us, from Bundle of Reads, and post that link in the reply.
Yeah. And if for some reason you're reluctant to show yourself, you can. I guess you can also send in audio questions, right?
An audio question is probably possible too. If you can upload it to YouTube, then it shouldn't be a problem.
Oh, right.
You can upload audio to YouTube as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can try that, but don't make them too long. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Gilad.
Chaim.
Thank you for that interesting abstract you gave about your thesis.
And thank you all for joining us. Although we're looking at a screen, but we know behind that screen there are many
There's a
people.
lot of you.
Yep, and we thank you for joining us every week, and looking forward to meeting you next week for the question
Right.
and answers.
So until then, see you. Looking forward. Bye.
Bye-bye.